Dr. Pamela Winters sat up in bed, Marguerite making uncomfortable noises as she tried to ignore her partner's sudden state. Vampires didn't really sleep, not like normal folks. Hell, Winter didn't really sleep either. The two entered an alternative state of mind where they put their minds in an open state, but something had interrupted that for Pamela tonight. She looked around, looking for the source of her agitation, but she couldn't find anything that would have brought her up. Nonetheless, Winter had heard something. No, heard wasn't right. She hadn't heard anything, not with her ears. It was the same way that she had known what the barker was. It was the same way that she had known what the ghost was when she had been in Stragview. It was a feeling on her skin, a feeling humans generally called a prickling of the hairs on their neck, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "What is it, my love? What troubles you?" Maggie asked, sitting up groggily. Pamela wasn't sure, but Winter had some ideas. It was like the shadows in the death house, except this one was cold. "Get dressed. We might need to go out." "Now? You do not usually go out after dark." "I think the town might be in trouble," Dr. Winter said. In that, she wasn't alone, and she wasn't the only one roused to action either. "Fog's really coming in," Officer McGrath commented as he and Officer Stebbins lit up outside the captain's office. "Fog?" Stebbins said, looking up to confirm that yes, there was fog coming in. "It's impossible. It's snowing." It had been a pretty light day, the snow keeping the inmates of Stragview inside, and the night had been even less active. The count had gone smoothly for once, and the one code they'd had that night was someone trying to hang themselves. This wasn't uncommon, as the holidays came and went, and they'd gotten him sorted and taken him to a show cell. They had all been enjoying a nice, peaceful night. Everyone knew better than to use the Q word until 6 a.m. came around. But the fog and snow could cause some real visibility problems out here. "Better tell the captain," Stebbins said, puffing on his cigarette as he rubbed his hands together. "He'll need to tell the post vehicles to go stationary." McGrath gave him a side-eye as the lighter stopped halfway to the exotic-smelling tip of the little cigar that he was planning to light up. "Why have I got to tell him?" "'Cause, stupid, your tinder ain't burning yet." McGrath was about to ask his friend who he thought he was calling stupid when a shadow came blundering up through the fog and the blowing snow. McGrath thought it was weird since most everyone else was snug in their dorms right now. Technically, he and Stebbins were supposed to be doing checks, a perimeter and a stun fence check, but they had stopped by the office to see if the snow would back off any before they headed out. The figure coming up was walking strangely, staggering like a drunk, and he wondered if some inmate had managed to make it out of the dorm. Stebbins seemed to have noticed him too, and he called out a challenge as whoever it was got closer to them. He expected the person to call back or break into a run once noticed, but they just kept coming. They were about 20 feet away when McGrath saw the last thing that he expected to see come stumbling out of the fog. It was a damn scarecrow. "What the hell?" he blustered, thinking someone was playing a trick on him. "Who the hell goes there dressed like that?" The figure said nothing, just continuing to come as if nothing had been said. "You know you're a little late for Halloween," McGrath said, his hands going to the can of OC spray as the thing still didn't say a word. He was expecting a prank, maybe some inmate drunk on Christmas spirits up to mischief. But this was a little spooky. Whatever it was, it just kept coming, and amidst the snow and fog, McGrath was pretty sure that he could see others too. As it came shambling closer to him, he thought he saw 3 or 4 or maybe as many as 6 coming for the lighted windows of the captain's office, and his neck hair was definitely up. He let fly with a stream of chemical agents, but amidst the wind and the falling powder, he couldn't be sure that any of it had hit the thing. McGrath was backing up, trying to distance himself from the advancing creature, when Stebbins came in with a right cross and sent it sprawling in the snow. "Son of a bitch," Stebbins breathed, his breath coming out in a puff. "You all right?" McGrath nodded, but he almost screamed as the scarecrow got up from the snow and began making its way towards them again. Both officers were backing up, trying to get to the door, when the thing suddenly burst into flames and went rolling in the snow. As they watched, the other shambling forms fell over, their bodies erupting in flame as the compound was lit by a sudden bonfire. Something else was coming out of the swirl, a new form that moved with purpose, and they straightened up as the visage of the warden came walking out of the fog. "Good evening, gentlemen. I wonder, could you tell me which captain is on tonight?" McGrath was left dumbfounded, the man in the pinstripe suit looking very out of place in the wintry landscape, but Stebbins managed to pick up the slack. "Kelly, sir. Captain Kelly's on tonight." "Oh, well," the warden said, looking unbothered by the floundering ragman not too far from their conversation. "I guess he'll have to do. Come with me," he told them, and the pair found themselves following before they could think better of it. When the warden said jump, you didn't bother to ask why. "Wake up, kid. We got business tonight, it would seem." I sat up out of a dead sleep, looking around and finding Grandpa standing over me. He was dressed in a long coat, his usual backwoods leather one, and had a floppy leather hat to match. He was leaning on one of those knobbly sticks he made for the tourists, but this one looked less for hiking and more for doing battle with the Dark Lord's minions. He sighed impatiently at me as I rubbed my eyes, trying to orient myself as I made sense of it all. "Gramps, what time is it?" "Time for you to get up, Grasshopper. Get your materials together. Something strange is afoot." I nodded, knowing better than to argue with Grandpa. He rarely came all the way up the stairs these days, and when he did, it was pretty important. As he stumped off downstairs, I got my accoutrements ready. I grabbed my sigils from the dresser, put on a coat similar to his that he had gotten me as an early Christmas present, and stared at the box on the top left shelf for a long moment before reaching in to feel the reassuring solidity of a different gift. It felt like cheating. Grandpa wouldn't like it, but I slid it into my pocket anyway before making my way downstairs. Grandpa was putting on his boots as I grabbed mine out of the shoebox, and I saw that he had brought my own walking stick from the entryway. It was made of dark wood too, though mine was stained. Whatever tree Grandpa had made his out of was that color, and it made for an intimidating piece of lumber. "Where are we going?" I asked, Grandpa putting on his satchel and heading for the door. "Into town, boy. Like I said, something's going on, and they need help." I looked at the clock on the fireplace. At 11:24 at night? "No, they needed help about 30 minutes ago, but you were getting ready," Grandpa said, laughing as I rolled my eyes and accepted the jab. "Any idea what it is?" I said, locking the door as Grandpa waited for me to unlock the ancient old war machine that was his truck. "No clue, but it's something bad enough to get me out of a dead sleep at this time of night." The engine roared as I brought it to life, putting it in gear and looking back as I pulled down the driveway in reverse. "Well then, let's hope it's something we can figure out pretty quick. I had things to do tomorrow." "Weather's looking funny out there," Mark said from the door. I looked up from my latest entry, proofreading the story about the ghost who jumped at 318, and saw that the lobby doors were covered in a thick fog. "Huh, that's weird," I said, getting up to stand with Mark by the doors. "You don't usually see fog and snow at the same time." "I don't think I've ever seen it happen," Mark said, almost dreamily as he reached for the lock on the door. He clearly wanted to go have a closer look, but as I watched the door, I saw something by the fountain that made me reach out to stop him. It was just a person, well, a person shape, and it was lumbering up for the door. But there was something about the way it moved that made me not want to let it too close. It walked like it might be drunk, but I had seen drunk people walk before. In reality, Seemed like whoever was walking was just pretending to be drunk. Mark shook me off, looking down at my hands with mild confusion and indignation. What'd you do that for? I don't know. I just don't think you should go out there. I saw something, and we both jumped when someone ran into the door, and I looked up to see the grinning face of a scarecrow. It was a little weird to see one so out of season, but we wouldn't have long to wonder why it was here. We jumped again when another scarecrow hit the glass, farther down, followed by a third and a fourth. I stepped to the desk, grabbing my radio as Mark watched them pile up against the guest entrance doors. Fortunately, the glass had been reinforced after an angry guest had tried to run his car into them after closing hours one day, and I figured that it would take a lot more than some flimsy straw man to get through that. Carl, you there? I said, keying up the radio. There was silence for a minute, and then came Carl's out-of-breath response. What's going on? We got something at the guest entrance door. A lot of somethings. He keyed over me, and I heard him curse at something before asking, Is it scarecrows? I nodded, but realized he wouldn't be able to see that. Yeah, like a ton of them. They're trying to come into the ER, too. I've sealed most of them in the vestibule area, between the inner and outer doors, but some of them got in already. I furrowed my brow. Wait, aren't they just people in costumes? Can't the police, like arrest them or something? Can't seem to get the police. Something's cut the phone lines of the non-emergency services. They're not working. What's more is that they aren't people. They're full of straw, but they move on their own. I heard him fighting with some of them in the background before he came back. Keep an eye on the door and let me know if they manage to crack the glass. I looked at the doors again and found that they were already 24 plastered against the glass, hanging to the window like bugs on a windshield. Is that likely? The glass is supposed to resist the initial collision of a small car. Yeah, well, so are the ER doors, but they've managed to bust it up already. They aren't through it, but they're making headway. I told him we'd keep him updated as the line went dead. Hell do we do? Mark asked. Sounds like we're on lockdown, I said, realizing that I needed to make the announcement. I picked up the overhead page phone and waited for 3 beeps before proceeding. All hospital staff and guests be advised we are in a state of lockdown. No one is to go in or out of the doors or open them for anyone outside. All staff and guests will be advised when the lockdown is lifted. I repeat, we are in a state of lockdown. No one is to go in or out of the doors or open them for anyone outside. All staff and guests will be advised when the lockdown is lifted. I hung it up with a click and sighed as I wondered what to do next. You better go back to the switchboard, I told Mark. Sounds like we might be about to get busy. Mark nodded, heading back as I watched the front glass pile up with cloth bodies. It was going to be a hell of a night here at Cashmere Hospital. You're asking me to basically abandon the perimeter, Captain Kelly said, steepling his fingers as the warden glowered down at him. I am, the warden said, clearly not liking the captain's tone. And if you don't do it pretty damn quick, we'll have 4 fewer officers to defend the compound. Because they'll be stuck outside the gate, Kelly asked, not seeming to like the implications. Because they'll be dead, the warden said, his words coming out clipped through gritted teeth. Right. Well, Warden, as you know, we have to have the perimeter manned. It's a violation of... The warden tuned him out, feeling the blood pumping in his ears as the man made excuses for his inaction. This is why the warden hated dealing with mortals with a spine. If Kipner had been on shift tonight, he would have sacrificed inmates in the yard if the warden had asked him to. Kipner was a spineless bootlicker, and the warden could get behind that sort of ladder climbing. Kelly, however, had morals and followed standards, and the warden couldn't fathom why he had promoted him to start with. So you see, it would be a violation of our... Captain, do you want the deaths of 4 officers on your head? That shut him up. I'm sorry. You're forgiven. Now get on your radio and tell them to park their vehicles by the front gate and get inside the compound before I find someone who will and put your uniform on them. Kelly looked affronted. "You can't speak to me like that, warden or not. I've got half a mind to," but the warden had already determined that he had half a mind, and no longer cared about this blather. He snatched up his radio off the desk and called all the post vehicles back to the control room gate. "Emergency code turquoise," he said, giving the signal for hostile individuals near the compound. "You sure, sir?" said one of the post drivers. "'Cause there's about a dozen individuals out here just—" "Yes, absolutely sure. Get back here now and bring your post weapons with you." "Weapons on the compound?" Kelly shouted. "You can't—" But the warden was already moving, closing the man into his office and holding the knob as he tried to get out. With a hard turn, he broke the handle, trapping Kelly in there for the near future. McGrath and Stebbins looked on in shock, but the warden was all smiles again. "I want every post with 2 officers to send the second officer to the control room. They are to arm and prepare to defend the compound. You 2 go to the dorms and collect anyone with an active weapons card. Leave the TAs and the uncarded officers to watch the inmates. Tell them not to open the doors until an all clear is given. Do you understand?" Both said they did, but McGrath was still a little confused. "Is there a riot, sir?" The warden mulled that over, finally saying, "Of sorts, more like a siege. Get moving, you 2, and avoid anyone you see in the fog. They will hurt you." The 2 left, and the warden stepped out onto the yard as he sized up the nearest scarecrow. There were more of them now, a dozen or more standing in the fog, and he snapped his fingers as 4 of them fell in flames. He had been roused out of what quantified as a sound sleep for him by the emergence of something not of this world, and he had feared that the laughing shadows had escaped from their confinement for a fearful moment. When he had smelled the cold and the damp, however, he had known who was trying to invade his territory. The cold night could hunt for the summer bitch across the length and breadth of the county, or the world even, for all he cared. But when he brought their scuffles into Stragview, an example needed to be made. He roasted a few more of the scarecrows, smiling as he imagined what his fierce older sister must be doing with the straw men in her town. If he was angry, then he imagined she must be livid. The scarecrows went up in flames as winter scattered them like chaff. She had smelled the cold night from the second she came out of her home, and she was furious at this trespass. Why was he here? To take her town like he had so many others? She had read about Fraser, about the farms they had found abandoned, about the nonsense his followers had stirred up, and she was not impressed. Let him take his war to other towns. Cashmere belonged to her. That gave her a thought, something that had been tickling at the back of her neck for months now. She had felt it near the end of summer, an emergence of energy like nothing she had ever felt before seeing the shadow creatures. And now, it was something almost background, like the hum of a live wire. There was a new force at work in Cashmere, something she didn't understand, but wanted to. "Come on," she said to Marguerite, turning to find her tearing into the strawmen with abandon. Her flesh mask had slipped a little, the creature beneath beginning to surface, but as Pamela called to her, she got herself back under control. Winter couldn't fault her. It had been a while since she'd been able to cut loose, but she didn't want any of the townspeople to see her like this. She could remove their memories, but Maggie would know that they had seen her, and seeing that pain in her lover's eyes would hurt her, too. "Where to?" Maggie said, her voice husky and amorous as she righted herself. "Remember how you asked me last month if we could go to the Botanical Gardens, and I told you spring would be a better time?" Winter asked, fixing her own glamour before she could give herself away. Maggie nodded, her lips returning to normal as her teeth softened and became smaller. "How would you like a trip to the gardens tonight? I have a feeling that what we're looking for may be there." "Take exit 3, kid, and step on it. I've a feeling that something bad might be going down in town." The tires of the old truck squealed as I cut through the snow and took the exit he'd indicated. 3? It's the exit of the Botanical Gardens. Hey up, whatever's going on, I have a feeling it's got something to do with that place. The parking lot came into view as we drove, the heavy old truck skidding only a little as the snow crunched beneath our tires. It was empty of cars, no surprise since they had been closed since December 1st, but as we pulled in, the lights suddenly came on, and I saw that I had been mistaken. I could see figures gathering in the fog, and I gasped as I realized how many there were. Angry movement drew my eye, and I noticed them hemming in a small group of people. They had swords or something in their hands, but I remember thinking they were terribly outnumbered. Both groups looked up as the headlights illuminated them, and I slammed my foot down on the brakes. I felt a cold twist in my guts, knowing I wouldn't be able to stop. The armed group ran, but the rest crunched as we barreled into them. The others scattered as we pulled into the parking lot, and we slid sideways in the snow as I cut the wheel, nearly flipping as we came to a stop. I was breathing heavily, afraid that I had done something unforgivable, but Grandpa put a hand on my arm, and I looked down to see him shaking his head. "They're constructs, kid. Nothing but straw. They aren't real people. You'll be okay." As they turned to look at the truck, the headlights casting them in vicious shadows, one of them looked a little more substantial than the others. He had a pumpkin on his head, something I could see might be a little more than a carved gourd, and as we sat glaring at each other, I jumped when the door opened harshly, and Grandpa hopped out. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to tell him to get back in, but when he brought the end of his staff down on the concrete, I knew this was why he had come. "That one might be a little more real than the rest. Look sharp, kid. We're in the thick of it now." There was suddenly a harsh arc of fire as a line came cascading from the park. The flames hit the assembled crowd, and I could see that Grandpa was right. As their clothes took flame, I saw their sackcloth faces and oil-black eyes. They fell to pieces as the fire touched them, but that didn't stop the others from coming to menace Grandpa and I. The Pumpkinhead's mouth stretched into an abnormal grin, the firelight turning him into a far too realistic bit of Halloween decoration. "Well, well, well. You picked the wrong party to crash, Chuck." You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story, or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad and Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributors. Thanks to Saikat, Lee Kendall, Janet, and Chris Kinsella for being our spooky skeleton tier contributors. And, of course, thanks to Xaronan, Winter, Tyler Parker, Stephanie Carrington, Sarah ASMR, Hi Stacy, Emily Coltsfoot, and Cinnamon Fox, and Bella Lee for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. As I said, if you'd like to have your name read out at the end of every episode that I make, and maybe get a little more, come on down to Patreon and sign up, or become a member on YouTube. Ghostly Reader tier contributors get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. So, what are you waiting for? Come on down and give it a look. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.